Welcome to the Assessing Training Needs session hosted by the Center for Court Innovation and funded through the U.S. Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women. My name is Jennifer White, and I am the Learning and Leadership Director of Futures Without Violence. I manage a project geared towards educational design and delivery called ILED, the Institute for Leadership and Education Development. The Center for Court Innovation's website and the ILED project have several tools to supplement this session and help you with your instructional design. Today, I will review with you a fundamental building block to the instructional design of education programs. The needs assessment process is perhaps the most important step in designing adult education, and that is true whether you are creating a short one-hour webinar or a longer multi-day in-person workshop. Our learning objectives today are that as a result of this session, you will be better able to consider the problem you are trying to solve with training and design educational content with a solid foundation based in learners' actual needs. The instructional design process generally includes a number of steps that build one on the other. The instructional design process that we will review here is not unique to ILED or the Center for Court Innovation. It is a design process that is used by educators of all types and is grounded in a variety of adult learning theory. It takes into account some of the most important concepts in adult learning, such as goal setting, the necessity of creating a relevant and realistic program, and the priority of placing the learner rather than the teacher at the center of the instructional design. The design process you see set forth here takes these priorities into account. The steps in the design process are to first identify a problem and set a goal, to conduct a robust learner needs assessment, to write SMART learning objectives, to design interactive and engaging learning activities, and to evaluate. Today, I'm going to focus on the needs assessment process. As you saw on the previous slide, evaluation is listed last, and that is a bit misleading. There are many types of evaluations, and in a well-designed and facilitated education session, you should include all types. In fact, in a well-designed and facilitated education session, you would begin your design with an evaluation, continue to evaluate during the program, evaluate at the very end of the program, and evaluate again several months after the program is over. The first evaluation is the identification of your problem and your needs assessment. The first thing to do is articulate your problem and consider whether education will help solve the problem. It helps sometimes to just write the problem as a statement. Once you have clearly stated the problem, it's much easier to decide what your learning needs are. Let's use the following example. You are an OVW grantee who provides supervised visitation services. Many of your clients are court-ordered to your services because they have engaged in domestic violence against a non-visiting parent. The court orders clients to use your services and has been indicating specific dates and times on the orders. You often cannot accommodate the specific schedule as indicated in the orders. You have received funding to conduct training for the courts and want to address this issue. Based on this statement, you have defined some parameters to your problem and have decided that education is in order. You may also decide at this point that something in addition to education is in order, like a policy change, a written tool, or some other form of outreach. Assuming you want to conduct education, we then need to conduct our next evaluation, a needs assessment. Assessing learner needs. What should learners receive from an education session? Let's consider a real-life analogy to think about the needs assessment process. Have you ever gotten a gift from someone and thought to yourself, this must have been a regift because there is just no way this person actually sat down, thought about me, and said, why, yes, what Jen White would really like is some rock climbing equipment, some books in Russian, and a pair of knitting needles and yarn. Now, while these are wonderful gifts, they are not pastimes that I personally currently have any interest in or have ever expressed any interest in. The other problem with these specific gifts is that they do not really have any universal applicability either, right? At least in the United States, it might be safe to assume that unless you run in very specific circles, a collection of Russian language literature may not be widely utilized. When you design education for adults without doing a needs assessment of some kind, you run the risk of buying a really expensive and really pointless unwanted gift. Why? Well, you haven't taken the time to consider who is the recipient and what do they want and need and what do they want to do differently. A needs assessment process provides you the opportunity to ascertain what individual learners might need by sampling learners themselves or sampling similarly situated learners. So the question we are asking is, what should learners receive from an education session? And we want to explore this question from a very wide lens. We want to include learners or a representative body of learners and others that have a vested interest in the outcome of your education session. It is often not possible, practical, or even useful to explore this question with the actual learners that you're hoping to reach. Why? Well, for one thing, if you are designing a program that you hope to deliver more than once, you likely cannot or do not want to redesign the program after every single iteration. Not to redesign it completely anyway. You may make minor changes, but you do not want to start from scratch each time. You also may not know at this juncture who specifically will attend the training. So for instance, you may know that judges will attend your training, but you do not know that Judge Tom Thumb will attend your training. So that is where the representative sample becomes important. Going back to my holiday gift example, in my family, we have an Uncle Jimmy that every year buys all 50 of his nieces and nephews. We are all adults, all around the ages of 30 to 40. He buys us all the same gift. Now, it's a different gift every year, but it's the same gift for each of us. And it's always something incredibly useful, like a portable computer speaker or a universal phone charger. So Uncle Jimmy caught on that while he can't necessarily ascertain the specific wants and needs of each of his 30 to 40 something year old nieces and nephews, but he has figured out that we share some commonality that might make, for instance, a portable computer speaker more useful than, for instance, a vast collection of Russian literature. So we want to think about who we can explore this question of needs with, who represents the learner, and who represents other stakeholders. This is an important query because it's also part of the buy-in process. If you are creating education to solve a problem or fill a need, you want to identify your assets. What do you have and what do you need? Those assets can and should include partners that you need to help solve your problem. Involving these assets or stakeholders, however you want to refer to them, at the beginning will help build relationship, will enhance your training, and very importantly, will create buy-in for your educational project once it is designed. You should continue to assess the learner needs or continue to evaluate throughout and after the program. If your education is intended to create behavior change, the best way to assess or evaluate the efficacy of learning transfer, meaning did the learning actually stick? Did what you educated the audience, did it actually stick with the learner? The best way to evaluate that learning transfer is to do it several months after your actual training. Using our example of the court and supervised visitation services problem, how would we conduct a sample needs assessment? We want to think about our assets and our needs. So who should you hear from? Who are your interested parties? We want to think about, for instance, members of the court, so judges, perhaps other court staff like clerks, people with expertise in domestic violence, people who work in supervised visitation, perhaps people with experience in custody matters, such as a child psychologist or custody evaluator, and also attorneys. You will want to list out who your assets are and seek to ask them these questions. What does our pool of learners need to know? I have done needs assessments in a variety of ways, and sometimes for certain projects, used a combination of the methods that you see here listed on the slide. One of my favorite ways is simply to assemble a group and ask the questions. You can do this in person or virtually. There are some great polling and free thinking tools you can use now if you choose to do this virtually. One of them that I've used recently is called Jamboard, Jamboard, and is available right through Google. I've also used surveys and questionnaires when I have wanted to reach a really wide range of individuals. You can also rely on research and data, either from third-party sources or from past programming that you have done. In closing, a needs assessment is a fundamental, I would argue, the most important step to creating a successful education program and to assembling the right people who will champion your session and thus increase its reach and impact. Your needs assessment should result in a robust picture of what your learner needs and should provide the basis for your next instructional design step, writing learning objectives. The Center for Court Innovation has resources and tools to help with your needs assessment and other important steps in this process. Please take a look at the Center for Court Innovation's Train the Trainer project and training guide. We would like to thank the Office on Violence Against Women for supporting this work to improve and enhance trainings that seek to make our systems safer and more effective for survivors of violence. Thank you.